Hey everybody, it's Sino. A few quick notes before the video. If you enjoyed the video, remember to leave a like, and consider subscribing for daily uploads of scary stories from Reddit. I'm including a link to my playlist featuring videos sorted by popularity in the video description below. And finally, this Sunday, June 4th, I'll be hosting a live stream on my wrestling channel for WWE Extreme Rules, where I'll be doing live commentary and coverage. If you're interested in joining me and checking out the channel, I'll include a link in the video description below. Again, thank you for all the support, and may your wildest nightmares come true. When I was 22 years old, I was a stay-at-home mom trapped in a failing marriage. My husband worked as a deckhand on a crew boat in the Gulf of Mexico. The schedule he worked kept him offshore for 3 weeks at a time, and then he would come home for a week. This meant my 1-year-old daughter and I were on our own most of the time, and I was going crazy. I had to get out. Out of the house, out of the marriage, just out. So, despite heavy protests from my husband, I decided to rejoin the workforce. Having no useful skills aside from diaper changing, I started applying for every horrible retail job I could find. A few weeks passed with no success, and I began to get discouraged. My husband was home from work and raising hell at the idea of me working, so I decided to throw in the towel. Then he called me, Mike, the Radioshack manager. Mike asked me to come in for an interview later that afternoon. I put on my most professional outfit, argued with my husband for a while, and left for the local Radioshack. I was so nervous. This was my first step towards freedom, away from that house and away from my husband. I had to ace this interview. I walked through the glass door in the tiny strip mall and was greeted by Mike. He was a short, stocky man in his 30s. I followed him to the back room where he asked me the usual questions. Then the questions became a little more personal, about my husband, my child, myself in general. I assumed he was just getting to know me and blew it off. He finished the interview by saying, "I've interviewed a lot of people, some of them have more experience, but you're definitely the best looking. The job is yours, if you want it." I didn't want it anymore, but I needed it, so I accepted. I went home feeling relieved, and before he left for work the next day, I told my husband I wanted to separate. I started my new job the following week. My first couple of days working there went well. I spent most of my time in the back room doing training on the computer. Mike hadn't said anything else inappropriate, so I thought maybe that comment at the interview was a failed attempt at humor. Then I began working on the floor. Every shift I worked the next week was with Mike, and Mike alone. He was the manager and I was new, so that seemed perfectly reasonable. However, Mike got progressively creepier as the week went by. He said he could tell how unhappy I was and that I should leave my husband. I didn't dare tell him I already had. He made endless remarks about how much money I was going to make the store because I could, quote, sell anything to a man. He told me how fat his wife was and how miserable he was with her. Definitely inappropriate, but nothing I couldn't handle. I'm not terribly unattractive, so I've dealt with many a creep in my day, so I dealt. My second week there, things got worse. I was still only scheduled to work with Mike and only closing hours. His comments got more aggressive, and he began texting me non-stop when I wasn't there. I was getting annoyed, but I really needed this job. I would always sidestep his advances, and he began to get angrier each time I did. One slow night, around closing time, we were sitting around killing time until we could lock the doors and begin cleaning. The registers were on this little semicircle island in the middle of the store. I was sitting on the counter, and he leaned against the counter opposite of me. He started walking towards me as he was talking. Eventually, he got uncomfortably close, so I stuck my leg straight out in front of me, trying to play it off as me stretching, which put my feet within 2 inches of his belly. He laughed, grabbed my ankle, and slung my leg down. That won't stop me. I turned and noped right off the other side of the counter, locked the door, and began cleaning. He sat on the counter watching me without saying a word the rest of the night. The next night, I closed with Mike again. I dreaded it, but I had no choice. I needed this job. To my surprise, the shift went by without incident. When closing time finally came, I locked the door and began cleaning. Mike sat quietly, perched on the counter, and stared at me again. I cleaned as quickly as I could. He eventually spoke up. "Come here. I need to show you something." He walked through the door and into the hallway that led to the bathrooms and office, and I followed. As soon as the door swung shut behind me, he turned. I pressed myself back against the door as he put his hand against it and leaned down. "You know, this is the only spot in the store with no cameras. I can do whatever I want right here and no one would know. I wish I could tell you I punched him in his ugly, smug face, or that I came back with some equally terrifying threat, but I didn't. I just stood there, pressed against the door." He removed his hand from the door, stood up, and took a step back. I ran. I ran through the store, out of the door, and to my car. I quit. I didn't need the job that badly. I would figure something else out, but at least this nightmare was over. I never had to deal with that man again. Wrong. As I was driving home, trying to process what just happened, my phone buzzed. A text message. From fucking Mike. I threw my phone back in my purse without reading it and went home. In the 5-minute drive from Radioshack to my house, I got 11 texts from him, and they kept coming. "I'm sorry. Didn't mean to scare you. It was a joke. Please come back. Where the fuck did you go? I have your address on file, you know, and GPS. Your husband is at work, right? You're in the blue house, right?" I was scared and home alone. What do I do? He's obviously outside of my house. Call the police? No, that would have made sense, so I didn't do that. I just kept the gun that my dad gave me within reach and ignored him. The text kept coming over the next week, until my husband finally came home. I didn't tell him at first because we weren't together, and we fought a lot about that fact. But he could tell something was bothering me. I finally told him. Everything. He didn't say anything for a few minutes. After a while, he said he was going to the store for cigarettes. He was gone for about 45 minutes. A trip to the gas station shouldn't have taken more than 10. I never heard from Mike again. This happened when I was doing nightclub security in the UK. It's actually the main reason I no longer work in the industry, though I tell people it was the hours that made me quit. I was chilling by the front door, and I see a fight happening, with a guy chasing another guy down across the street, and I'm like, oh well, it happens. 99% of the time, they just shout a little bit and try to intimidate one another, and go get a kebab, and puke. Mainly, they just look to make the other person think they are going to fight. Think peacocks shaking feathers at one another. This time, however, the guys got into a tussle against the parked car, and pretty quickly, the chased guy was down for the count and passed out after some hefty blows. At this point, I need to intervene. It has literally been seconds since the start of the fight. They are across a very busy one-way street, so I try to stop the cars so I can get there in time. It feels like hours, but I get in between them. The aggressor is kicking the other guy's head over and over, full force as he lies on the ground. This is when I realized he might die. I think to myself, why am I getting in the middle of it? But I can't help it. I get between them and shout at the aggressor to stop. Luckily, guys don't often want to fight girls, but I am ready to defend myself in any case. He makes at me like he is going to start kicking me too, and I brace myself to block any strikes. He grins and books it up the road instead, and I can focus on the guy on the ground. I try to give him first aid. I stopped the bleeding. His face is just a hole basically, so it's pretty hard. And the back of his head is gone too. I know of the old, if you need someone in a gathering to phone an ambulance, you need to choose a person and give them direct orders, not just ask in general. So I ask, or more like bark an order at, the only guy around I see with a phone out to call 999, or 911 in the US. His eyes are blank and he holds his phone still. It's like in a nightmare when you yell to draw attention to something but no one can hear you. I tell him again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. I start shouting, raising my voice. He needs to call an ambulance. The guy is dying. He needs help. I realize by the way the guy is moving around that he is filming us, probably trying to get a good shot of the guy's face as he lies dying by me. I feel like I am in Black Mirror. Eventually, someone else phoned. I haven't seen any YouTube clips from that area or from around that date, though I've looked. He might have taken it down. My incessant shouting at him and asking what is wrong with him might have deprived him of some likes or something. I don't know what happened to any party. I am going to court soon for the assault/attempted murder, but I am not sure what the charge is. I am pretty sure the injured guy made it out. I never saw anything about it in the news, which is a good indicator. He might not have been so lucky though. I am sure he stopped breathing just before help arrived. I just pray that if something happens to me or someone I care about, bystanders will call for help, instead of trying to capture something on film.